Indigenous communities have borne some of the worst consequences of humanity's impact on the planet. But that, for some, has only strengthened their resolve to protect ecosystems for everyone. In this next lightning talk, we'll hear from a youth climate activist from Indonesia's Dayak community, who's truly living her mission of doing as much as possible for the earth and its people. Take it away, Laetania Belai Djandam.
The forest is our father, the land is our mother, the water is our blood. This is a phrase that stands at the heart of the Dayak Iban Sungai Utik people, an indigenous community in West Kalimantan, Borneo, that I am very close with. The Sungai Utik people are special, and it's because their culture is still very much alive. They still live in a traditional longhouse and are surrounded by 10,000 hectares of customary forest. The people have lived by the rule of protecting the forest and respecting the Dayak Iban culture for more than 100 years. And under the guidance of Apay Janggut, their strong leader and forest guardian of Sungai Utik, the community have been protecting their customary forest from illegal logging, corporate interests, palm oil, and managing it sustainably for generations. Their ethos, the forest is our father, the land is our mother, and the water is our blood, shows how their culture and a healthy environment are inextricably linked. If they lose their environment, they lose their culture, their identity. And if we don't respect their culture, they will not be empowered to maintain their environment, our environment. However, preserving the environment today looks a lot different than it did generations ago. I remember speaking to the Sungai Utik's cultural leader, Apay, who told me that he was able to deny offers from those corporations many years ago because he believes that they are poor not when they are deprived of money, but when they are deprived of land, of forests. The priority of Apay's generation is acknowledgement of their way of life and recognition of their rights. This is an admirable view of one's respect and dependence on their environment. However, my recent visit to the village tells me that the younger generation is moving past that notion. The more they are connected to the outside world, the more they yearn for modern concepts such as a steady cash income, good education for their children, quality healthcare, consumables, all of which are not readily fulfilled by retaining their current way of living that is subsistence and largely separate from the outside world. The younger generation simply have different priorities, which is why I always say, culture cannot survive as a museum. In an ever-changing world, cultural values endure, but culture must evolve. Protecting the forest must persist, but its application needs continuing innovation to bridge the gap between the important values imparted by the older generations with the needs and desires of the younger generation. And one possible way to do this is through a payment for ecosystem services or PES scheme. PES works by providing compensation, payment, to communities that steward their land in a way that sustains the ecosystem services it provides. This is an incredible opportunity for indigenous communities like Sungai Utik, who are looking for a way to have their land rights recognized and protect their forest, to create long-term livelihood and income opportunities, especially for the younger people. Now, in order to effectively prepare for and implement the scheme in Sungai Utik, I spent the last 2 months in West Borneo, visiting several villages that are operating or are in the process of applying for PES in their community. But as I learned more about the lengthy and complex planning, documentation, and reporting requirements before and during its implementation, it became clear that the stated global desire to respect Indigenous people and Indigenous practices and to reward the stewards and protectors of our natural areas contrasts with the multiple requirements that Indigenous people are simply not equipped to do. For example, the technological literacy required to produce a land use map of the customary forests, which is needed to guide the location of proposed conservation activities. This imbalance between recognizing Indigenous people as the best forest stewards and modern global expectations that forests should primarily be stores of carbon and biodiversity can result in gaps and difficulties. Hunting in the forest, for example, that is essential to the Sungai Utik people's way of life, but it is often labeled as harmful for the environment. However, these gaps and these difficulties can be overcome. In the short term, it needs coordinators, for example, like myself, who can understand both sides, such as the desire to hunt versus the modern need for conservation of biodiversity, or the need to report on how money is spent versus the fact that this is an alien concept for communities who tend to record things by word of mouth rather than on paper. And in the longer term, by involving the youth, involving Indigenous people of my age in a serious way right from the beginning, educating and equipping them to be the leaders of a pest scheme that will be running in the course of their lifetime. Planetary health is about thinking long-term and finding a balance between people and nature. There is not a simple formula for pests, nor a fast and easy way to do it. But if it is done with a long-term view, with the complete inclusion of Indigenous voices in the planning, the empowerment of young Indigenous people in the implementation, and the independence of Indigenous communities as the vision that it is centered upon, then it is a promising way to protect forests and include Indigenous peoples, finding the balance between their culture and autonomy and our global efforts to protect the forests of the world. Thank you.